Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles. I should have known Tessa wouldn't go down quietly. I thought that when our marriage ended, that would be it. We'd split, move on, and go our separate ways. But Tessa had other plans. Plans that involved dragging me to court and trying to rob me blind. I wasn't completely shocked when I got served with legal papers, but when I read what she was demanding, I almost laughed. She wasn't just asking for a fair settlement, she wanted half my assets. Alimony for life and a portion of my retirement fund. Her reasoning: Derek abandoned me. He ruined my life, and I deserve compensation for the suffering he caused. Suffering, that's what she called it. If you had met Tessa before all this, you'd think she was charming, elegant, and sophisticated. She knew exactly how to work a room, how to make people believe she was sweet and helpless, and that's exactly what made her so dangerous. Tessa didn't just lie. She built entire realities that weren't true, and she was incredibly good at it throughout our marriage. She played the role of the supportive wife, always smiling in public, always standing by my side, like the perfect partner. But behind closed doors, she was a financial wrecking ball. "Derek, you're the provider," she would say whenever I suggested she find a job. "You should want to take care of me." A real husband wouldn't make his wife worry about money. I worked long hours, built a solid career, and provided everything she could ever need. But it was never enough. Tessa never worked, never contributed, never once considered that marriage was supposed to be a partnership, and when things didn't go her way, she turned into a master manipulator. When I finally had enough and filed for divorce, she lost it. "You're ruining my life," she screamed when I broke the news. "After everything I've done for you, I gave you the best years of my life, and you're just throwing me away like garbage." "No, Tessa," I said, my voice. "Cal, despite the storm in front of me, I'm not throwing you away. I'm escaping. Our split should have been simple. We had no kids, no shared business, and we signed a fair prup before the wedding. But Tessa, that wasn't good enough. You're selfish." She spat at me during one of our final arguments. "You don't even care about what you're doing to me." I didn't respond. There was no point in arguing with someone who rewrote history to suit their narrative, and when our divorce was finalized, I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong, because that was when Tessa started plotting her revenge. When I showed up for the first court hearing, I expected Tessa to at least pretend to be civil. I should have known better. She sat across from me, her head held high, smirking like she had already won. She wore a designer dress. One, I vaguely remembered paying for pearl earrings and the same expensive handbag I had bought her years ago. You know, the one she once claimed she'd sell because she didn't need material things. Yeah, that one. The moment she saw me, she didn't look angry or hurt or even anxious. No, Tessa looked amused. She locked eyes with me, leaned in toward her lawyer, and whispered something before flashing a slow, knowing smile. Like this was all some elaborate game, and she was already 3 moves ahead. Her lawyer, a middle-aged man with an air of practiced sympathy, stood up. First, his voice was smooth, dripping with faint concern. "Your Honor, my client has suffered severe emotional and financial distress due to Mr. V's abandonment." Abandonment, that was the word they went with. She was left with nothing. He continued, pacing slowly, a devoted wife relying on her husband's financial support only to be discarded without warning. She dedicated years of her life to this marriage, sacrificed her own career, her own ambitions, and now she has been left struggling to rebuild while Mr. Vaughn moves on without a second thought. I almost laughed out loud. The truth: Tessa was never abandoned. She had full access to a bank account with more than enough money to restart her life. She had been given a very generous settlement in the divorce, a settlement she agreed to. But fair was never enough for Tessa. She didn't want her share. She wanted everything. Her lawyer kept throwing out every emotional buzzword they could think of. She sacrificed her career for him. She never had one. She supported his ambitions by spending my money. She deserves proper compensation. For what exactly? When he finally sat down, there was a moment of silence in the courtroom. Then, as if on cue, Tessa leaned back in her chair, crossed her legs, and smiled. She thought she had me. Tessa thought the judge wouldn't even question her story. and for a second I almost believed it too from where I sat. It looked like he was actually considering her argument. He nodded along. Meanwhile, Tessa sat there with the same smug little smirk, like she could already taste victory. I clenched my fists under the table. No, I wasn't about to let her get away with this. I turned slightly to my lawyer, Ron Jeremy. He leaned in, keeping his voice low. "Let her talk," he murmured. "The more she lies, the easier it is for me to take her down. And soon I will smash her right here, right now." I looked at him with amazement, and I was happy that I hired him. Tessa was going to get screwed in the court, so I sat back, arms crossed, letting her dig her own grave. The longer she spoke, the deeper she buried herself. Tessa, so caught up in her performance, had no idea what was coming. She played her part, flawlessly, voice breaking at all the right moments, hands delicately dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. God, she's good. I thought if I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her myself, but she didn't know. That I did know something had come to my attention weeks ago. A secret, a detail she had no clue I had uncovered, and it changed everything. I hadn't told anyone, not her, not even my lawyer. But I would at the right moment. Tessa wanted a fight. She was about to get one she truly believed had already won. Sitting there in that courtroom, with her perfect posture and well-rehearsed expression of suffering, she was so sure the judge was buying every word, and to be fair, for a moment it looked like he was. But what Tessa never even considered, what had never once crossed her mind, was that I had already seen this coming. The moment I got served with legal papers, I knew I needed someone who could see through Tessa's manipulations. That's when I called Ron Jeremy. Ron wasn't just any divorce attorney. He was the kind of guy who had made a career out of tearing apart baseless lawsuits. His reputation alone was enough to make most people think twice before trying to pull a stunt like this. When I sat down in his office and told him everything, he listened carefully, barely reacting then. After a long pause, he leaned back in his chair and said, "I've dealt with women like this before. She's overconfident, which means she's sloppy. Give me time, I'll find something," and find something he did. Ron started with the basics. Financial records, credit history, any past legal disputes at first. Nothing surprising came up. She had some debts, not shocking considering how much she spent. She had no real employment history again. No surprise there. But then Ron found something off. "Derek," he said, one afternoon, gesturing for me to come over to his desk, "have you ever seen this document before?" I walked over and looked at his monitor. It was a marriage record. My first instinct was confusion. Why was he showing me our record? But then I noticed something. The date it was from years before I even met Tessa, and the name next to hers. Jared Foster. My stomach tightened. "Are you saying?" She was married before? Ron exhaled sharply, his finger scrolling down the screen. "Not just married," he pointed at another section of the record. "There's no record of a divorce." Silence. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. My eyes flicked back and forth between the names, the dates, searching for something, anything that might prove this wasn't what it looked like. "Wait. So, you're telling me Tessa was still legally married when she married me?" Ron gave me a grim nod. I sat back in the chair, exhaling. Slowly, Ron rubbed his chin, already thinking a step ahead. This changes everything. How my voice sounded distant, like it wasn't even coming from me. He looked me dead in the eye. "Think about it. Derek, if she was never legally divorced," he let the words hang for a moment before finishing, "then your marriage to her was never valid. Tessa and I were never legally married. That meant she had zero legal claim to my money. Every demand she made, every dramatic accusation, her entire case was built on a lie. From a legal standpoint, our marriage never even existed. And once the judge found out, her entire scam would come crashing down." I looked up at Ron. "So what do we do with this?" He smirked. "We sit on it." I frowned. "Shouldn't we just submit it to the court now?" "No," he said, leaning back in his chair. "If we do that, she'll have time to come up with excuses. She'll claim she didn't know that she forgot or spin whatever nonsense she thinks will save her. I nodded slowly, seeing where he was going with this. But if we drop this bomb while she's under oath, he continued, when she's already fully committed to her lies, she won't be able to talk her way out of it. I exhaled, letting the brilliance of the PL sink in. We were going to let Tessa dig her own grave, let her build up her case thinking she was untouchable, and then at the perfect moment we'd rip it all out from under her. My jaw tightened. She wanted a war. She was about to get one. Tessa walked into the courtroom like she was stepping onto a red carpet dressed in an expensive designer outfit, her hair perfectly styled, that smug little smirk plastered on her face. It was obvious she was enjoying this to her. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a performance she had spent weeks spinning. Her narrative painting herself as the innocent, struggling ex-wife Cruy abandoned by her heartless husband, and today she was ready to give the performance of a lifetime, or at least that's what she thought the judge, an older man with sharp eyes and a non-nonsense demeanor, called the court to order. Tessa's lawyer, Eugene Peru, a sleek-looking guy with an air of practiced charm, rose from his seat with a measured confidence. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Tessa Smith, has suffered unimaginable hardship due to the reckless abandonment of her husband, Derek V. W. I almost laughed. Mrs. Tessa Smith. She wasn't even legally AM, but I kept my expression neutral, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Eugene continued, his voice full of false sympathy. For years, my client devoted herself to her marriage only to be cast aside. Without financial security, she gave up career opportunities, dreams, and stability, all for a man who treated her as disposable. I clenched my jaw but remained still. And now, Your Honor, she finds herself struggling to survive, forced to rebuild from nothing, while Mr. Vaugh continues to enjoy the wealth they accumulated together. That's when Tessa turned on the theatrics. She let out a shaky breath, pulling a tissue from her expensive handbag, the same one she once swore she'd sell because she wasn't materialistic. She dabbed at her eyes with just enough pressure to make it look convincing, then sniffed for dramatic effect. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling, "I never thought I'd be in this position. I trusted Derek. I loved him, and he threw me away like I was nothing." She choked back a well-rehearsed SOB. "I'm just asking for what's fair." The judge nodded, jotting down notes. I noticed the shift, the small flicker of sympathy. She was good. I had to admit she knew how to play the part, how to manipulate an audience. Tessa sat back in her chair, exhaling as if relieved. She thought she had already won. Then the judge turned, his sharp gaze to me. "Mr. Vaugh, do you have anything to say in response to these claims?" I glanced at Ron. He gave me a small nod. "Stick to the plan," so I did, keeping my voice calm and steady. I met the judge's gaze. "Your Honor, I did not abandon Tessa. In fact, she received a fair settlement during our divorce. She was given financial support, which she recklessly spent. This case is not about fairness, it's about greed." Tessa let out a dramatic gasp. "Greed. I gave you everything." The judge held up a hand, silencing her. Tessa clamped her mouth shut, but crossed her arms, glaring at me like she was the victim. Ron stood buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, before we proceed any further, I'd like to cross-examine Mrs. Smith." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Ron walked to the table in front of us. Picking up a thick stack of documents, he flipped through them, then looked up at Tessa with an almost casual expression. "Mrs. Smith, is it true that you had full access to a shared bank account after your divorce?" Tessa sniffled, still playing the heartbroken ex. "It wasn't enough to live on." Ron arched a brow and held up one of the documents. "And yet records show that in the first 3 months after your divorce you spent over $10 on luxury handbags, vacations, and spa treatments." He paused, letting the words settle. "Would you like to explain that?" A flicker of irritation crossed her face, but she quickly recovered, flipping her hair over one shoulder. "Self-care is important, Mr. Paul." A few people in the courtroom chuckled. Even the judge smirked slightly, but I wasn't looking at them. I was watching Inger. Tessa didn't look nervous, Not even slightly, because she thought this was just about money. She thought the worst. That could happen, was that she wouldn't get as much as she wanted. She had no idea what was coming. The judge leaned back in his chair. All right, I've heard both sides. I'm ready to make a ruling. Tessa straightened in her seat, smoothing her dress. Then she smiled. She actually smiled like she already knew the verdict, like she had already won. And that's when Ron stood up one last time. Your Honor, before you rule, there's something she hasn't told you. The room went silent. Tessa's face twitched. For the first time that day, she looked uncertain. The judge narrowed his eyes. Mr. Jeremy, what exactly are you referring to? Ron calmly reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. We recently uncovered some interesting documents regarding Mrs. Smith's marital history, Tessa Stiffen. Ron flipped open the folder, carefully removing a certified marriage record. He turned it toward the judge. Your Honor, Tessa Smith was never legally married to my client. The entire courtroom froze. You could hear the faint scratching of a pen abruptly stop as the judge halted. Mid-sentence. The air felt thick, charged with the kind of tension that only comes when someone's entire world is about to collapse in front of them. Tessa's jaw actually dropped. Her perfectly poised, smug demeanor shattered in an instant. That's not true," she stammered. Ron didn't even flinch. With an almost casual ease, he slid the stack of documents across the judge's bench. "This is a certified record, Your Honor," he said smoothly. "It shows that Mrs. Tessa Foster was legally married to another man, Jared Foster, at the time she supposedly married." My client, a ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Even Tessa's own lawyer, Eugene Peru, looked blindsided. He leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but she barely seemed to hear him. Her fingers clawed at the edge of the table as though she could physically hold on to the life she had built on lies. The judge flipped through the documents, his frown deepening. Ron continued, his voice unwavering. "There is no record of a legal divorce from Mr. Foster. So tell me, Mrs. Foster," he emphasized her last name with a hint of mockery, "how exactly were you planning to claim alimony from a marriage that never legally existed?" Tessa's face drained of all color. She looked like a ghost of the woman who had strutted into the courtroom, so confident, so sure of her. "Victory, this is a mistake," she gasped. I didn't know." Ron arched an eyebrow. "You didn't know his." Tone was incredulous but controlled, like he was speaking to a child caught with their hand in the cookie jar. He picked up another paper from the stack. "Because according to these records, you and Mr. Foster owned a property together 5 years ago." He held up the document for effect. "You signed a lease. That doesn't sound like not knowing." Tessa swallowed hard. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably beside her, clearly trying to formulate some kind of defense, but even he looked like he knew this was game over. The judge's expression darkened, his patience wearing thin. He set the documents down carefully, as if handling a loaded gun. Then he looked up, his sharp eyes locking onto Tessa, like a predator closing in on prey. "Mrs. Smith," he said, his voice measured but cold, "is this true?" Tessa opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Nothing came out. Tessa's eyes darted frantically around the room, searching for an escape, a loophole, anything, but there wasn't one. She was trapped. The judge's gaze was heavy, unrelenting. "Mrs. Smith," he said, his tone dangerously calm, "answer the question." Tessa swallowed hard. I didn't think it mattered." The judge's expression dark. "You didn't think it mattered?" His voice was so sharp it made her flinch. "Didn't move? Didn't react?" "I just watched as the walls of her carefully constructed deception crumbled around her." The judge exhaled slowly, shaking his head as he set the document down on the bench. Then he folded his hands in front of him and spoke, calm, measured, but furious. "Mrs. Smith, do you have any idea what you've done here?" Tessa tried again. "Your Honor, The judge cut her off with a look that could have frozen hell itself. "No, you don't speak. Speak, you listen." Tessa froze. "You came into this courtroom under oath and knowingly built your case on a lie." His voice was steady, but laced with barely concealed anger. You claimed financial hardship from a marriage that legally never existed. You wasted this court's time. You wasted Mr. V's time, and worst of all, you tried to manipulate the legal system for your own personal gain. The room was silent. You could hear the faintest rustle of fabric as people shifted in their seats, the quiet creak of a chair as someone leaned forward, but no one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the entire courtroom was collectively holding its breath. I watched as Tessa's face drained of color. She looked at her layer silently pleading, but Eugene Peru wasn't looking at her because he was already packing up his briefcase. Tessa's mouth opened and closed in quick succession, her breathing turning shallow. Panic seeped into her expression as she whispered, "Eugene, you can fix this, right?" Peru calmly stood adjusting his suit jacket. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of disdain in the way he looked at her. Then, without hesitation, he turned to the judge. "Your Honor, in light of this revelation, I am formally withdrawing from this case." Tessa let out a choked sound. "I cannot, in good conscience, continue representing a client who has misled both myself and this court." Peru continued then, without another word. He picked up his briefcase and walked out. Just left her there. Tessa stared after him, her horror mounting. "Wait. No. You can't just leave." I banged. The judge slammed his gavel down, cutting her off. "Mrs. Smith, sit down." Tessa whimpered and sank back into her seat, her shoulders shaking. That was it. She was alone now. The judge let out a long, slow breath, clearly trying to rein in his frustration. Then he picked up his notes. "Given the circumstances," he said, "this case is not only dismissed with prejudice, but I am also ordering Mrs. Smith to cover all legal fees incurred by Mr. Vautessa's head." Snapped up. "No, Your Honor." Please, the judge didn't acknowledge her. He just kept going. Furthermore, he continued his voice. "Resolute due to the fraudulent nature of this case, Mrs. Smith may be subject to further legal action, pending review by the district attorneys. Office fraud." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Tessa's entire body started shaking. Her fingers clenched into the fabric of her blouse as if she could hold herself together by force alone. "This can't be happening," she whispered, almost like a prayer. But it was happening, and it was only getting worse as soon as the gavel struck and the case was dismissed. The whisper started. Low murmurs rippled through the courtroom like an oncoming storm. Spectators leaned into one another. Lawyers exchanged glances, and the quiet hum of disbelief filled the air. She tried to scam him. Unbelievable. She's finished. Tessa's face was beet red. Her breath came out in short, panicked bursts as she sat frozen in her seat, and then for the first time that day, she turned her gaze to me. Her lips trembled, and for a split second I saw something in her eyes, desperation, regret, maybe even the smallest flicker of shame, like she wanted to beg, to plead for some kind of mercy. But I just sat there, arms crossed, expression blank. Because Tessa, she did this to herself. She played a game. She never should have started, and now she was paying the price. The moment we stepped outside the courtroom, Tessa completely fell apart. The second, the heavy doors swung shut. Behind us, she ran after me. Her heels clicked frantically against the polished marble floor. "Derek, wait, please, just wait a second." I stopped, slowly turned. She was a mess. Her hands were shaking, her eyes, red and puffy from unshed tears. Gone was the smug, overconfident woman who had strutted into that courtroom, convinced she was going to win. Now she just looked small. "This is a mistake. Right?" she pleaded, her voice cracking. You don't really want to see me suffer like this, do you?" I tilted, my head slightly studying her. Even now she was trying to manipulate me, even now, after everything she thought she could twist this into something that I was doing to her. "Tessa," I said slowly, "you spent months trying to ruin my life." She whimpered. "But I didn't mean to. I was scared, Derek. I thought I'd end up with nothing." I let out a slow breath. "Tessa, that's exactly what you deserve." Her breath hitched, her face crumbling like shattered glass. You hate me, don't you?" I didn't answer right away because the truth was worse than that. I didn't hate her, I just didn't care anymore. My final words were cold as ice, "Goodbye, Tessa," and then I turned and walked away for good a year. That's how long it had been since I walked out of that courtroom and out of Tessa's life forever. And in those 12 months, everything had changed. For me, life had never been better for Tessa. Well, that's what she probably told herself, but karma wasn't done with her yet. After that courtroom disaster, after watching Tessa self-destruct in real time, I made a decision. I was done living in the past, done letting her take up space in my head. So I moved, not because I had to, just because I wanted to a fresh start. 0 reminders of her, and it turned out. When you're not constantly being drained by a manipulative, greedy woman, you can actually focus on your own success. I got a promotion at work, reconnected with old friends, started traveling more, even started dating again. Nothing too serious. I wasn't in a rush, but for the first time in years I felt completely free. No walking on eggshells, no constant manipulation, no battles over money, just peace and Tessa. I didn't think about her at all until one random afternoon when I ran into someone I never expected to see again. It happened at a coffee shop near my office. I was just grabbing my usual. When I noticed her at first, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked different. Not bad, just worn down like someone who had been fighting a long losing battle. She was sitting alone at a corner table, staring at her phone like she was waiting for a message that wasn't coming, and she wasn't dressed in her usual high-end brands, no designer handbags, no expensive jewelry, just a cheap basic sweater and a pair of plain jeans, for the first time ever. Tessa looked normal. I could have walked away, could have ignored her completely. But curiosity got the best of me. I ordered my coffee, took a deep breath, and walked right up to her table. Tessa, her head snapped up, and the moment her eyes landed on me, I saw it all: surprise, embarrassment, regret. She sat up straighter, her fingers twitching as she reached for her hair, like fixing it would somehow erase the last year, like she still cared. "About looking perfect in front of me, didn't expect to see you here," she said, her voice uncertain. I studied her, taking in the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she clutched her phone like it was a lifeline. This wasn't the Tessa. I remembered the one who walked into every room like she owned it. No, this. Tessa looked defeated. "Yeah," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Didn't expect to see you either." She swallowed hard. I moved." "Yeah, where to?" She hesitated. "Just a little place across town." I raised an eyebrow. "Studio apartment." Her eyes widened just for a second before she let out a sigh. "Yeah." I nodded, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "How's work?" She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Oh, you know, between jobs." Oh, there it was. She had lost everything, and now she was barely keeping her head above water. She looked at me carefully like she was trying to read my expression. "You look good," she said quietly. "I feel good." She bit her lip. "I've been thinking about you." I set my coffee down, waiting, because I already knew where this was going. About everything, how things ended, how I acted. She took a shaky breath. "I've changed, Derek." I've grown. Her voice softened, almost pleading. I miss having you in my life." She reached across the table, fingers grazing toward my hand, her eyes searching for something, anything to hold on to. I pulled back, and in that second, she knew she had lost me forever. I looked at her. "Tessa, I don't think about you at all." Her face crumpled. She looked down, swallowing hard, her hands curling into her lap. "I get it," she whispered, and for the first time she didn't argue, she didn't manipulate, she didn't play the victim. She just sat there alone. I stood up, took one last sip of my coffee, and exhaled. "Take care, Tessa." Then I walked away, and I never saw her again. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.